Well, good day, and welcome to the emotion edition of 5-Minute Psych. In this 5-minute segment, we'll explore how psychologists explain our emotional experience by looking at 4 theories of emotion. But first, we'll consider the intuitive view of emotion as a basis for comparison. We'll see that although psychologists have long debated how we experience emotions, not one theory explains it the way you would intuitively think it works. Intuitively, you'd think that emotions are responses to eliciting stimuli, and the emotions then trigger the physiological arousal. In other words, you see a bear in the woods, a scary eliciting stimulus, and this causes you to feel the emotion of fear. That feeling of fear then leads to changes in your body like shaking, sweating, an increase in breathing and heart rate, and so on. It seems perfectly logical that our emotional experience would work this way. And yet, not one theory of emotion explains it like this. So what do the other theories say? The James-Lange theory believes that our emotional experience arises from our physiological arousal. In this case, the bear in the woods triggers physiological arousal, and this internal state leads you to feel the emotion of fear. According to this view, different emotions are triggered from different patterns of physiological arousal. Some support for this view comes from the facial feedback hypothesis, which says that feedback from the face muscles to the brain plays a key role in our emotional experiences. One study found that when we activate our smiling muscles by holding a pencil in our teeth, we rate a joke as much funnier than when we activate our frowning muscles by holding a pencil between our lips. This suggests that just activating different face muscles can make us feel different emotions. But there are problems with the James-Lange theory too. For one, we can be physiologically aroused through exercise, and this doesn't trigger strong emotions. Also, when we look at the physiological response to different emotions, we find it's very similar, or at least not different enough to form the basis for our emotional experiences. Unlike the James-Lange, the Cannon-Bard theory insists that our bodies don't immediately respond to an eliciting stimulus, but instead, maybe a few seconds go by before our bodies react. Even so, we feel the emotion immediately. The Cannon-Bard theory says that the eliciting stimulus is processed in the thalamus, and from there, it travels along 2 independent pathways. One pathway goes to our body and physiological arousal increases, while the other pathway goes to cortical areas, which gives us the emotional experience. So if we see a bear in the woods, the sensory input from the bear first goes to our thalamus, and then from there, the signal travels simultaneously along 2 pathways, one that activates our body, while the other makes us feel fear. Today, researchers disagree with the idea that the thalamus is where the emotional experience begins, but they agree that it would be in a subcortical structure. The 2-factor theory tried to account for the fact that not only do we feel different emotions, but we can feel each emotion with different levels of intensity. So the 2-factor theory says that our emotional experience depends on both our physiological arousal and our cognitive appraisal of that arousal. So our physiological arousal determines the intensity of the emotion, whether it's a strong emotion or not, whereas the cognitive appraisal would allow us to label our emotion with what we feel, whether it's happiness, fear, or sadness. So if we see a bear in the woods, this causes us to feel strong physiological arousal and cognitively assess the situation as dangerous, both of which would trigger a strong feeling of fear. However, more recent work has shown that we don't have as much flexibility in our cognitive labeling of an emotion as the 2-factor theory would lead us to believe. Finally, evolutionary theories attempt to explain our emotions as adaptations that helped us to react to eliciting stimuli in a way that increased survival. So if our ancestors saw a bear, those that felt fear and reacted accordingly more likely survived and passed on that emotional reaction to their offspring. Support for the evolutionary view comes from the fact that people from all different cultures show similar emotional displays and can recognize those displays in others instantly. We do seem born ready to read and express emotions, regardless of where we came from. Well, we just looked at how psychologists explain our emotional experiences by first considering the intuitive view of emotion as a basis for comparison before focusing on 4 theories of emotion. We saw that although psychologists have long debated how we experience emotions, not one theory explains it the way you would intuitively think it works. Now, aren't you glad you had 5 minutes?